The stage lights at the annual company summit are too clean, too white, like someone tried to erase every shadow in the room before I arrived. She is standing in the audience, not supposed to be seen. That was the original plan. On stage, he adjusts the microphone like it belongs to him, like it has always belonged to him. 3 weeks ago in the elevator, he said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather outside. You're reliable. That's your advantage. Reliability is just another word for replaceable. He was holding my project file when he said it, my version, the one with timestamps, the one with my name still embedded in the metadata before it got cleaned. I smiled once, not because it was funny, because that is what people expect from women in meetings like that. Soft compliance, controlled silence. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me what city you are in. 2009, she is in a resource classroom with fluorescent lights that never fully turn off, the kind that hum even after school ends. Golden Child got private tutoring in mathematics, Golden Child got violin lessons in a soundproof room, Golden Child got winter camp in another country. She got a library card with ink smudges and someone else's old sticker still half attached. 2013, she works night shifts at a convenience store. The register makes the same sound every time it opens. Golden Child got internship through Family Connection. Golden Child got manager's personal recommendation letter. Golden Child got monthly allowance that never needed counting. She got $6 per hour shifts and a broken pen tied to the counter with string. 2020, she leads a project worth 8 figures. She learns to speak in boardroom silence. She learns that credit travels faster when it is not attached to her name. Golden Child got future leader, written into emails before the work was done. Golden Child got meetings where decisions were already pre-approved. Golden Child got invitations that arrived before effort existed. She got performance reviews that always ended with the same sentence. Let's revisit this next cycle. The first time she tried to upload her full proposal to the internal system, it disappeared within hours, not deleted loudly, not removed dramatically, just quietly gone like it had never been there. Later he said, "You're too emotional about ownership. It's just work." He said it in a meeting with 3 other people present while scrolling on his phone. That is the thing about microviolence. It does not raise its voice, it lowers yours. Now it is present day again. He is on stage, the promotion script is already printed, my name exists on none of it. But inside my bag, there is a folder, not heavy, not dramatic, just organized. Every version I was told to delete, every comment I was told to ignore, every revision that quietly removed me from my own work. He glances down at the audience, he sees her, he does not remember the elevator conversation. People like him rarely archive those moments. But I do. And tonight is not about remembering, it is about exporting. The email arrives at 02:14 a.m. Subject line, final revision, approved version. Final is always a word used by people who want control to sound like completion. She opens it immediately, not because she trusts it, but because she no longer delays things that are designed to erase her. The attachment is there, her project. Or what used to be her project before language was cleaned, ownership was redistributed, and authorship was turned into something invisible but technically shared. The file name is 3 letters now, SYS, as if identity can be reduced into infrastructure. She opens it. The formatting is identical to her version. The structure is identical. Even the sentence rhythm still carries her original pacing. But her name is gone, not replaced with someone else. Just removed in a way that feels administrative, like deleting a row in a spreadsheet. Clean, quiet, procedural. That kind of erasure is always more violent because it does not look like violence. She scrolls to the bottom. There is a line added by him. We optimized clarity and streamlined contribution ownership. Streamlined contribution ownership. It is not a sentence. It is a mechanism, a way to turn authorship into shared air that no one can hold. She leans back in her chair. The chair is plastic, the kind that bends slightly inwards if you sit long enough, like it is learning your posture so it can tolerate you better. Her screen light reflects on her fingers. No reaction yet. She has trained herself out of immediate reaction. Reaction is what systems depend on. Instead, she downloads the file. Once, twice, 3 times, different formats, PDF, docx, internal system snapshot export. Each version saved into a folder that is not connected to company cloud storage. Offline, encrypted. Named, project history NOT final. The irony is not lost on her. She does not smile. Smiling is also a form of participation. At 03:02 a.m., she receives a calendar notification. Project alignment meeting 09:00 a.m. Organizer him. Attendees, her, him, 2 directors, 1 HR representative. Agenda, final confirmation of delivery ownership. Delivery ownership, not work, not contribution, ownership. The system is already preparing language for the transfer. She closes her laptop. The sound is soft, like a book being shut in a library that does not belong to her anymore. 3 weeks earlier, same building, same floor, but different temperature in the air. He is standing near the glass wall in the hallway, coffee in hand, phone in the other. He does not look at her when he speaks. You're dependable. Pause. That's rare. Another pause. In your role. He finally looks at her, like someone checking whether a tool is still usable. You know, not everyone is meant to lead. He takes a sip of coffee, then adds casually, you stabilize things, that's valuable. Stabilize, like she is infrastructure, not direction, not origin, just something that prevents collapse. She nods once because nodding is the least expensive form of survival in rooms like this. He walks away. His shoes make a clean sound against the floor, every step controlled, every step certain. She watches until the sound disappears, then opens her laptop and sees the first unauthorized modification in her file. Not deletion, modification. A single paragraph rewritten. Her explanation of system architecture replaced with simplified language, something she would never write, something easier to present, something easier to steal. She opens version history. Access denied. Permission level changed. Her access reduced to viewer only. Viewer, not contributor, not owner. Viewer, like she's being reassigned from creator to audience inside her own work. She sits there for 18 minutes, not moving, not reacting, just counting timestamps. 12:04 a.m. original upload, 12:18 a.m. first edit, 12:47 a.m. Ownership metadata change. Someone worked fast. Someone worked clean. She realizes something simple. This was not sudden. This was scheduled. Golden Child enters the narrative officially on day 19. He is introduced in an email thread. Subject: Team Optimization Update. His name appears at the top, not because he wrote anything, but because he is now attached to her work like branding, like labeling a product after packaging is complete. He sends her a message privately. Hey, just wanted to align. Alignment, another word for absorption. He attaches a revised file, her project again, but now with his initials in the header. She opens it. Scrolls, there are 3 new sections she did not write. 1 metaphor, 1 simplified diagram, 1 executive summary rewritten in his tone. She recognizes it immediately, not because it is similar, but because it is hers, translated into someone else's vocabulary. She replies short, "This is not my version." He replies in 2 minutes, "Let's not get emotional about ownership. It's collaborative work." Collaborative, a word that only exists when power is uneven. She closes the chat, does not respond again. The first internal meeting happens in conference room 4B, glass walls, artificial lighting, table long enough to prevent intimacy. He sits at the center. She sits slightly to the side, not by accident. Positioning is always pre-designed. A director speaks first. We're aligning on delivery attribution. Attribution, a word that sounds technical but functions like redistribution. He slides a printed document across the table. Her project title is there, but the author field is blank. Golden Child's name is not there yet, but the structure is already preparing for it. She asks one question, "Where is the original submission log?" The room pauses. Not because it is a hard question, because it is inconvenient. He answers without looking at her. It was streamlined for clarity. Again, clarity, the official language of removal. She nods. Once. Again, because in rooms like this, disagreement is not heard. It is recorded as instability. That night, she does something she has never done before. She builds a second system, not illegal, just parallel. She extracts every version of her file history, every comment thread, every timestamp, every overwritten paragraph. She names each file not by content, but by violation type, removed authority, unattributed paragraph, rewritten idea, accessed DNID log. She builds folders like evidence rooms, not emotional, structural. By 04:11 a.m., she realizes something. This is not a project anymore. This is a record of disappearance. And disappearance, once documented, stops being invisible. It becomes transferable. At 09:00 a.m., she walks into the meeting again. Same room, same chairs, same lighting. But now she knows the architecture of what is happening. He starts speaking first. This is the final confirmation of ownership alignment. He looks at her briefly, like checking whether she has accepted her position in the structure. She opens her laptop, not to argue, not yet to confirm. The folder is ready, not sent, not exposed, but complete. And for the first time in this entire system, she is not inside the file. She is outside it, watching it. The system never loses information. It only changes who is allowed to see it. And she learns that not from any manual, but from watching her own work behave like it has a second life inside the company infrastructure, one that no longer needs her presence to continue existing. At 01:36 a.m., she finds something new, not missing, not deleted, but repositioned. A folder that once sat under her project directory has been moved into a shared leadership space, permissions rewritten, ownership tags changed at metadata level rather than content level, which is always how real erasure begins. The file still carries her structure, her logic flow, her sequencing, but the system now displays a different author line, clean switch, no visible transition, and she does not react immediately because reaction is inefficient when dealing with systems that rely on delay. Instead, she traces backward through every click path, every permission change, every invisible administrative action that never appears in the visible history layer. There are timestamps but no names attached, only neutral system language like adjusted, optimized, streamlined, words designed to remove accountability without sounding emotional. At 02:11 a.m., she understands something simple. No one stole her work in a single moment. It was done in fragments, small permission shifts across different times of day. Small edits approved in meetings she was never invited to. Small decisions framed as efficiency improvements. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger resistance. Everything small enough to feel normal. And that is how ownership disappears inside structured systems, not through theft but through distribution. Golden Child enters deeper into the structure, not as sudden replacement, but as gradual attachment layer. His name appearing in update emails not as creator, but as alignment owner. A phrase that does not exist outside corporate language, but functions perfectly inside it. She opens one of those emails, subject line, finalization of contribution mapping, and sees his name listed above hers in hierarchy order. Not because of time or effort, but because hierarchy is not a reflection of work, it is a reflection of proximity to decision. She scrolls and finds a line she recognizes immediately. Her paragraph, her structure, her explanation of system behavior under load conditions, rewritten not improved but reframed, and she opens comparison view. Her version on the left, his on the right. The difference is not technical but tonal, her writing precise and modular for system integrity, his shaped for presentation, trimmed until it fits comfortably into leadership language, and she notices something more important than the rewrite itself. The system now treats his version as default while hers is labeled reference only. A word that sounds neutral but functions like archival containment. At 02:49 a.m., she logs into the audit trail interface, buried 3 layers deep, designed for administrators who assume no one else will ever look this far, and she looks anyway. Logs appear in rows, date, action type, system component, no human identifiers, but she has learned how to read absence now. 12:04 a.m. Access elevation request, 12:07 approval, 12:09 metadata rewrite initiated, 12:12 ownership flag changed, 12:14 visibility scope adjusted, the entire transfer taking 10 minutes, not theft but workflow. She leans back, chair making a soft plastic sound, and realizes something worse than concealment. The system is not hiding what happened, it is normalizing it, because normalization means repeatability. At 03:15 a.m., she receives a message from him. We should sync tomorrow. There seems to be confusion about attribution. And she understands how confusion is just another word used when clarity is already controlled. She does not reply immediately. Instead, she opens her folder, NOT final, which is no longer just backup, but has grown into structure, containing version histories, screen captures, and audio extracts from meetings where her name is spoken and then replaced mid-sentence. She plays one recording from conference room 4B, here's her sentence, here's interruption, here's replacement. Her voice continuing in documentation, but not in attribution, and she pauses it not because it hurts, but because she is mapping structure instead of emotion. At 03:41 a.m., she creates a new folder, transfer chain, and begins reconstructing the full timeline of every modification event, not as isolated incidents, but as sequence, because sequence is what turns invisible behavior into visible design. She notices every change aligns with meeting cycles. Every ownership shift happens shortly after scheduled reviews. Every rewrite follows decision windows, nothing random, everything synchronized. And she closes her laptop not because she is finished, but because she has identified the pattern. And once a pattern is identified, it can be interrupted. At 09:00 a.m., she attends the meeting in the same room, same table, same lighting that makes everything feel slightly unreal. He speaks first again. This is about resolving attribution confusion, repeating confusion as if repetition can replace proof, and she looks at him without looking away this time. Not confrontation but observation, then opens her laptop not to present or argue, but to confirm that the folder still exists outside the system. And it does. And for the first time, the system is no longer the only place where truth is stored. The first sign is not dramatic, it is administrative, because in systems like this, collapse always begins in paperwork before it becomes public noise. At 08:13 a.m., she receives an automated HR acknowledgement email with no human signature, only a case number. Case 44719, internal review initiated. And she understands immediately that her folder has been touched from the outside. She does not open it yet, because opening is no longer curiosity, it is timing. Instead, she watches the system behave differently around her name, like air pressure shifting in a sealed room. By 08:47 a.m., her access level changes again, subtle but measurable. 2 folders become read-only for compliance review. Her editing rights disappear without notification, and the word audit appears in 3 separate internal threads where it did not exist the night before. At 09:00 a.m., she attends the scheduled meeting, but the room feels recalibrated. HR is now present, legal counsel is present, and the seating arrangement has shifted in a way that is not discussed but clearly designed, because in corporate environments, geometry is always a form of narrative control. He begins speaking first, not aggressively, but carefully, using language that sounds like documentation instead of accusation. We've been made aware of concerns regarding attribution clarity. She notices how quickly ownership has been replaced with clarity, because clarity is the word institutions use when they want ambiguity to become policy. Golden Child is not in the room yet, but already present in implication, referenced indirectly as aligned contributor in revised documentation, a phrase so clean it removes the need for a face. She does not interrupt. She does not defend. She only observes how quickly language reorganizes reality when multiple departments agree to repeat it. By 11:26 a.m., something shifts outside the company firewall. It starts with a screenshot, not from her, from someone she does not know personally, but who recognizes enough of the structure to understand what they are looking at. The screenshot is not the full archive, only a fragment. One comparison view showing her original paragraph on the left and the rewritten version on the right, with metadata timestamps partially visible. It appears on a professional discussion board first, framed as internal documentation discrepancy. Within 12 minutes, it is reposted on a social platform. Within 38 minutes, it is reshared with the word pattern attached to it for the first time. She does not post anything. She does not confirm anything. She does not deny anything. She simply watches as the structure she built begins to leave the system without her permission. At 12:03 p.m., HR requests an emergency follow-up meeting. At 12:07 p.m., legal sends a preservation notice to all relevant departments, instructing employees not to alter or delete any files related to case 44719. At 12:19 p.m., her inbox fills with automated flags marking sensitive internal material exposure risk, and the system begins labeling her own documentation as if it has become external evidence rather than internal work history. She notices the language shift again. What was once project contribution is now content under review. What was once revision history is now potential integrity concern. The system is not denying the data anymore. It is reclassifying it. At 13:41 p.m., she receives a message from him. No greeting, no context, just a single line. You escalated this beyond internal resolution. She reads it twice, not because it is unclear, but because it confirms something she already mapped. Escalation is only what the system calls it when control is no longer exclusive. She does not reply. Instead, she opens her archive folder, Note Final, and notices something different for the first time. It is no longer isolated. Files inside it are being duplicated externally, not by her, but by other viewers who now have access to fragments through shared exposure. The evidence is no longer contained. It is propagating. By 15:18 p.m., the first HR containment statement is drafted internally. She sees a leaked version of it 20 minutes later. It is carefully worded, neutral, stripped of names, describing the situation as a misunderstanding regarding documentation ownership alignment. She recognizes every technique inside it: dilution, passive framing, distributed responsibility. She understands that the statement is not meant to explain what happened. It is meant to slow interpretation. At 16:02 p.m., the first major external post goes viral. It does not use her name fully. It does not need to. It uses screenshots, timestamps, and structural comparison images. Comment sections begin doing something the system never anticipated: reconstructing narrative independently. People begin mapping her timeline without access to internal tools. Someone labels it silent attribution theft pattern. Someone else writes, "This is not one incident, this is workflow design." She reads none of the comments directly. She only watches volume curves. At 18:44 p.m. he calls. She does not answer. He calls again. She lets it ring. On the third attempt, he sends a message instead. This is getting out of control. Control. The word appears again, now outside institutional language, but carrying the same structure. She finally replies with nothing but a single line. It was always visible. It was just not distributed. She does not elaborate. At 20:11 p.m., HR requests her physical presence in the office the next morning. At 20:39 p.m., legal requests all original source files for verification of authorship sequence. At 21:05 p.m., her access is partially restored in some areas and further restricted in others, creating a fragmented visibility map where she can still see her own work but cannot fully interact with it. The system is now simultaneously reviewing her and preserving her. At 23:58 p.m., she sits alone with her laptop open, watching her archive spread across channels she does not control anymore. Note Final is no longer a private structure. It has become a distributed object, replicated in fragments across multiple platforms. She does not feel urgency. She does not feel panic. She feels confirmation. Because now the system is doing something it never did before. It is reacting to her documentation instead of rewriting it quietly. And for the first time, she understands what exposure really means in systems like this. It is not visibility. It is irreversibility. The next morning does not arrive with resolution. It arrives with volume. Because once internal systems lose containment, they stop behaving like architecture and start behaving like noise. At 07:42 a.m., she wakes up without an alarm, not because she is rested, but because notifications no longer respect sleep cycles. Her phone is already filled with layered alerts, some internal, some external, some duplicated across platforms where she never posted anything herself. The first HR message is still polite in structure, still corporate in tone, but the meaning has shifted completely. You are requested to attend an immediate clarification session regarding external data dissemination. Clarification. The same word again. A word used when institutions want confusion to sound procedural instead of political. At 08:15 a.m., she opens her archive, not final, and sees something she did not directly cause but fully anticipated. The folder has been mirrored across multiple external sources, not as a single leak, but as fragmented replication. Screenshots detached from context. Metadata extracts posted separately. Audio clips re-uploaded with captions written by strangers trying to reconstruct structure without access to original intent. She notices something precise and unsettling. The system is no longer the only interpreter of her work. Interpretation has been distributed. At 09:00 a.m., she arrives at the office, but the atmosphere is no longer internal. It feels exposed even before she enters the building. People avoid eye contact in ways that are not coordinated but clearly influenced by something they have already seen. HR is waiting, legal is waiting, and for the first time, a communications officer is also present, which means the situation has crossed from internal governance into external risk management. He is already there. He does not look at her immediately. When he does, it is not anger. It is recalibration, like he is trying to measure how much of the narrative is still under his control. The meeting begins without formal introduction, because introductions imply neutrality, and there is no longer neutrality available in the room. HR speaks first. We are here to address the unauthorized distribution of internal project materials. The phrase unauthorized distribution is doing heavy work here. It is replacing words like documentation, evidence, and timeline. She notices how quickly language shifts from structure to accusation depending on audience. Legal adds a second layer. We need to verify authorship continuity across all versions. Continuity, as if authorship is something that must remain uninterrupted to be considered valid. She finally speaks when asked a direct question, and even then she chooses minimal structure. She says she did not distribute anything outside the system. She says she compiled her own records of internal modifications. She says those records became visible once other users accessed them. No emotion, no defense, just sequence. The communications officer writes everything down without looking up. Golden Child is mentioned for the first time directly in this meeting, but still indirectly framed. Aligned contributor involved in revised documentation chain. The phrasing is deliberate, designed to avoid assigning origin while still acknowledging participation. She watches how carefully the system avoids naming responsibility while still distributing it. At 11:23 a.m., the first external media mention appears. Not a full article yet, but a summary post referencing alleged internal attribution restructuring within a corporate project environment. Within minutes, it is reshared with stronger language. Within an hour, it becomes a pattern narrative. People begin connecting screenshots she never grouped together publicly. Someone reconstructs the timeline more accurately than the company's internal logs. She notices something important. Outside interpretation is now more structured than internal explanation. At 12:10 p.m., he sends a message again. Short, controlled. You're escalating a misunderstanding into reputational damage. She reads it without reaction. Misunderstanding is still the preferred institutional framing because it implies no intentional structure behind the outcome. She replies only once. It was already structured before I exposed it. At 13:44 p.m., legal requests full custody of her archive. Not access. Custody. The word change matters. It signals ownership transfer attempt over evidence itself. She refuses through formal channel. No explanation, just refusal. At 15:02 p.m., the company issues its first public statement. It is carefully constructed, neutral in tone, removing all names, describing the situation as an internal documentation alignment review currently under assessment. She reads it once. Then again. She recognizes the technique immediately, reframing exposure as process, replacing responsibility with ongoing evaluation, converting evidence into ambiguity. At 16:37 p.m., external commentary shifts again. This time it is no longer just screenshots being shared, but analysis threads. People begin mapping structural patterns across multiple organizations, using her case as reference point. The narrative is no longer about her alone. It is becoming about system behavior. She does not participate. She does not guide it. She simply observes how quickly isolated evidence becomes collective interpretation once released. At 18:55 p.m., he calls her directly. She answers this time, not immediately, but after a long pause that makes the connection feel heavier than the conversation. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. He says, "You didn't have to take it outside." She responds after a moment, "It was already outside. You just controlled where it could be seen." There is silence on the line, not emotional silence, but structural silence, the kind that happens when a shared assumption stops functioning. At 21:08 p.m., she returns home and opens her laptop. NOT Final is no longer a single archive. It has become multiple mirrored versions across platforms, forums, private reposts, anonymized reproductions. She scrolls without urgency. For the first time, she is not tracking ownership of the evidence. She is tracking propagation. At 22:30 p.m., she understands what has fully changed. The system is no longer describing her work. It is responding to it. HR is no longer containing it. Legal is no longer stabilizing it. Management is no longer interpreting it. It is now public structure. And in that moment, she realizes the final shift is not exposure itself. It is irreversibility of. The final shift does not begin with noise. It begins with silence inside the system, the kind of silence that appears when too many processes are running at once and none of them are allowed to resolve cleanly. At 06:58 a.m., she wakes up already knowing something has changed, not because she is notified, but because the absence of new internal emails is itself a signal. No HR reminders, no legal follow-ups, no correction threads, just a suspended quiet that feels more unstable than conflict. At 07:14 a.m., she opens her laptop and sees the first confirmation. NOT Final is no longer contained. It is no longer even fragmented. It has become replicated across multiple external channels, reorganized by strangers into timelines, diagrams, and comparative breakdowns. What she once structured as internal evidence has now been rebuilt as public documentation. Not identical, not controlled, but coherent enough to survive outside her original intent. At 08:03 a.m., the company issues a second statement, shorter than the first, more cautious. It removes even the phrase internal review and replaces it with external interpretation event. She reads it once and understands immediately what has changed. They are no longer trying to explain the situation, they are trying to rename it faster than it spreads. At 09:00 a.m., she is not invited to any meeting. That is how she knows the structure has already moved past containment. In the conference room she used to sit in, there is now an emergency alignment session without her name on the participant list. He is there. HR is there. Legal is there. Communications is there. But she is no longer a required variable in the system trying to interpret her own work. At 09:27 a.m., the first external article becomes fully structured. It is no longer speculation. It is reconstruction. Screenshots, metadata comparisons, version histories, timestamp analysis. Her work is no longer being discussed as a claim, but as a pattern. And once something becomes pattern, it stops belonging to individuals. Golden Child is mentioned repeatedly in the analysis threads, not as a person, but as a structural beneficiary. Aligned contributor positioning. Pre-approved attribution flow. Visibility redistribution sequence. Language that no longer belongs to the company alone, but to the public interpretation of it. At 10:11 a.m., he sends her a message. It is shorter than before. No preface, no framing, just one line. You turned this into something uncontrollable. She reads it and does not respond immediately, because she understands something he still does not. It was never under control, it was only internally hidden. At 10:44 a.m., she uploads a final public file. Not emotional, not explanatory, not defensive. Just structured. The file name is simple, authorship sequence complete. It contains everything: version histories, audit logs, side-by-side comparisons, audio fragments, metadata exports, internal permission changes. Every step that was once distributed across hidden layers is now consolidated into a single readable structure. No interpretation added, no narrative voice inserted, only sequence. She does not announce it. She does not post commentary. She simply releases it. At 11:02 a.m., the first wave begins. Not outrage, not debate, structure recognition. People begin mapping timelines again, but now using her file as reference point instead of isolated leaks. Analysts outside the company reconstruct the entire progression of ownership transfer within minutes. The system's internal language is now being translated externally without permission. At 11:37 a.m., HR attempts a final containment message. It never reaches full distribution. It is intercepted by internal escalation protocols already overridden by external visibility. Legal drafts 3 versions of a clarification statement and deletes all of them within 17 minutes. At 12:18 p.m., he calls her. She answers this time. He does not speak first. That is new. Silence is no longer his tool. He says, "What do you want now?" The sentence is tired, not powerful. She understands that this is the first moment he is reacting instead of structuring. She replies after a pause. Nothing new, just visibility that matches reality. There is a long silence, not dramatic, administrative, like a system waiting for instructions that will never arrive. At 13:06 p.m., the company's internal project page is archived, not deleted, not corrected, archived. A controlled disappearance that still confirms existence. Golden Child's name remains in some external discussions, but no longer as authority, only as reference point in a structural case study. At 14:22 p.m., she leaves the office early. No announcement. No final interaction. She walks past the glass walls where meetings used to define her value and realizes something simple. She is no longer inside any version of the system that once needed her invisibility to function. At 16:00 p.m., the narrative is fully externalized. News summaries, analysis threads, breakdown videos, corporate governance discussions. The story no longer belongs to her, and that is the point. It belongs to interpretation now, and interpretation cannot be recalled. At 18:45 p.m., she deletes none of her files. She archives nothing further. She simply renames one folder. Note final becomes finalized visibility. Not as closure. As confirmation. At 21:10 p.m., there is no final confrontation. No apology. No collapse scene. No dramatic resolution inside a room. Only a system that continues functioning without pretending it understands itself anymore. And for the first time, she is not inside the structure being rewritten. She is outside it, where rewriting no longer applies. And the system, for the first time, knows her name, but too late to use it. The office is already awake before he arrives, fluorescent lights buzzing at 06:47 a.m., coffee machines dripping, keyboards clicking in regular sequences that feel like clockwork but aren't timed for him. He notices the first email. Subject line, internal escalation notice. No capitalization errors, no typos, just procedural wording. He opens it at 06:52 a.m. and reads the sentence 3 times. Unauthorized dissemination of project materials is under review. He does not flinch. He only adjusts the tie knot that has been slightly loose since 07:03 the previous morning, a tie that is navy blue with small gold dots, worn once every Tuesday and Thursday, tied in a Windsor knot that someone else taught him in the second week of his first summer internship. The clock on the wall reads 06:54 a.m. precisely. He notices it. At 07:12 a.m., he checks the audit logs. Timestamp 03:47 a.m., file copied, metadata extracted, 3 screenshots detached, 1 audio clip transcribed automatically. Not her doing directly, but she was always clever enough to anticipate it. He compares the logs with the calendar. 22 meetings attended, 18 on his invite, 4 not his problem. He makes the same note every time. Visibility control remains partial. He opens a folder labeled Final Draft V2070326. Each subfolder has 12 documents. Each document has 37 track changes. He counts them because patterns matter. By 08:30 a.m., social media alerts start pinging. 24 mentions in the first 12 minutes. Articles, threads, commentary videos. People outside the company are using timestamps and version histories to reconstruct her contribution. He scrolls without expression. He notes the accuracy of her preparation, the structural integrity of her actions. Not anger, not surprise, just data logging. At 09:15 a.m., he attends the first internal alignment meeting without her name on the agenda. HR speaks first. We are reviewing external interpretations of internal authorship sequences. He listens while noting the precise wording, noting how they avoid using her name directly. Legal adds, please confirm metadata continuity. He notes that this phrasing reinforces control without naming the operator. He adjusts the cuff of his shirt that has a tiny fray on the left sleeve, worn since December 2025, never repaired. By 10:02 a.m., he realizes the replication is widespread. NOT final is no longer just internal. It is mirrored across 6 external platforms, timestamps preserved, structure intact. Visibility he thought he maintained is now public pattern. He observes the feeds. People are reconstructing ownership, aligning sequences, drawing diagrams. He notes the speed. 47 minutes for first pattern map, 89 minutes for first commentary thread exceeding 50 interactions, 123 interactions total within 2 hours. At 11:11 a.m., he drafts a personal note to himself. Control was always illusory. Effort does not equal containment. Sequence matters more than authority. He rereads it. He folds it into a tiny square, places it inside a drawer containing 3 pens, 2 staplers, 1 half-empty bottle of hand sanitizer, and a green sticky note with illegible numbers scribbled in October. By 12:44 p.m., the external narrative has taken shape. Analysts outside the company are citing version numbers, screenshot line counts, audio transcript lengths. She is now a structural reference point. He notes that no internal narrative will override this. He makes a note: internal authority diminished, external structural recognition elevated. He takes a sip from a mug with a faint chip on the rim, the mug he bought on July 4, 2024, at a small airport store. At 14:20 p.m., he does not call her. He cannot. Silence is now the system's medium. HR sends a message: meeting canceled due to ongoing external interpretation. He reads it, puts his phone down at exactly 14:22:07. He does not look at the clock again for 2 hours. By 16:17 p.m., he leaves the office for the first time since 06:47 a.m. The tie remains perfectly tied. Shirt cuffs still adjusted. He notices the slight difference in ambient noise, fewer keyboard clicks, fewer coffee drips. The office feels reorganized without him influencing it. He walks past the glass walls that once displayed his name on project boards, now empty. By 17:45 p.m., he sits in his car. He does not start it. He watches traffic move, 23 cars pass, 4 bicycles, 1 pedestrian walking a golden retriever. He notes, the system continues, but he is no longer necessary to its operation. Data flows, people reconstruct, patterns emerge. He observes, recording sequences in his mind, internalizing structural shifts. At 19:01 p.m., he writes the last line of his personal note. Recognition of sequence is permanent. Authority without sequence is illusion. He does not send it. He does not show it. He folds it, places it in the same drawer with the green sticky note, 3 pens, 2 staplers, and half-empty hand sanitizer. By 21:33 p.m., the office lights dim automatically. He does not notice at first. Then he notes that she, outside the system, controls what he cannot influence inside. And for the first time, he experiences structural anxiety, not emotional, not dramatic, but factual. The sequence is no longer under his control. By 22:00 p.m., he writes down 3 numbers on a separate sticky note: 37, 89, 123. She has already matched each with external interactions. He places it on his desk, alongside everything else, and leaves. No confrontation, no apology, no statement. Only recognition. The structure outlasts him. By 23:12 p.m., the office is empty. He is outside, sitting on a bench in the parking lot, tie still neat, cuff still frayed. He watches the night. She is no longer in the system. He is still inside it, and he knows it will never be the same. It starts with a screenshot at 11:06 a.m., posted by an account with no real name, only a default avatar and a username that looks auto-generated. The kind people usually ignore until it starts accumulating attention it was never designed to hold. The image is cropped poorly, showing only part of a comparison table. Original paragraph on the left, rewritten paragraph on the right, timestamps visible in the metadata corner if you zoom in far enough. No one knows the full context yet, but that has never mattered on the internet. Context always arrives later, after interpretation has already taken its place. By 11:19 a.m., someone replies with a thread. Not emotional, not outraged, structured. They label it sequence anomaly. They list 3 observations: version mismatch, attribution shift, and timestamp compression. The language is unusually calm, almost clinical, like a report written by someone who has seen similar systems before. It gets shared 84 times in the first hour, not because it is dramatic, but because it is legible. At 12:03 p.m., a second post appears, this time with more material. Not just screenshots, but extracted logs, partially redacted, showing modification times: 12:04, 12:07, 12:09, 12:12. A user comments, "This is not editing. This is structured reallocation." Another replies beneath it, "This looks like workflow, not theft." The words begin to shift away from morality and into architecture. By 12:47 p.m., a third wave begins. Someone reconstructs the timeline using only public fragments. They build a diagram, boxes, arrows, version layers. The post is titled Visibility Transfer Model. It gets shared into professional networks, then into unrelated communities, then into places that were never meant to care about corporate documentation structures. But they care anyway, because structure is universal even when language is not. At 13:21 p.m., a short video appears. Screen recording. No voice, just cursor movement over version history. The cursor pauses at ownership metadata. The caption reads, "Watch the change happen in real time." It is viewed 47,000 times in 3 hours, not because it is shocking, but because it is undeniable. By 14:08 p.m., commentary splits into 3 groups. One group argues exploitation. One group argues misinterpretation. One group stops arguing and starts mapping. The third group grows fastest. They begin labeling patterns: pre-approved attribution flow, visibility hierarchy shift, structured credit displacement. The language becomes increasingly system-like, as if the audience is learning to speak the same dialect as the evidence itself. At 15:33 p.m., someone posts a simple sentence that spreads faster than the original leak. This is not about one person. This is about how authorship is stored. It gets copied, reshared, translated, stripped of attribution itself. Ironically, it becomes the most accurate reflection of the entire situation. By 16:12 p.m., the original company statement appears in fragments on social feeds. People break it down line by line. External interpretation event. Ongoing review. Alignment clarification. Each phrase is annotated by strangers who treat corporate language like code that must be decrypted. Someone writes, "They are describing exposure without acknowledging it." It gets 12,000 likes. At 17:40 p.m., analysts outside the company begin producing longer breakdowns. They compile screenshots from different sources, align timestamps, compare versions. They discover something unexpected. The structure of the evidence is more consistent than the official narrative. One comment reads, "The documentation is too clean to be accidental." Another replies, "It's not accidental, it's procedural." By 18:55 p.m., the conversation is no longer about her as an individual. It becomes about system behavior. People begin referencing other industries, other cases, other patterns that resemble this one. The case becomes a template, not emotional, not personal, structural. At 19:31 p.m., a post appears that changes the tone slightly. It simply says, "She did not leak chaos, she released sequence." It is reposted without commentary. Then again, it becomes a framing device. By 20:17 p.m., engagement shifts again. The narrative stabilizes, no longer fragmented outrage, but collective reconstruction. People begin treating an OT final as if it were a dataset rather than a scandal. They extract structure, not story. At 21:44 p.m., someone writes, "We are not reacting to her anymore, we are reading her system." This sentence spreads quietly, without amplification, because it does not provoke emotion. It provokes recognition. By 22:30 p.m., the original posts are no longer the focus. Secondary analyses dominate. Diagrams, timelines, version trees, attribution flows. The internet has stopped asking what happened and started asking how it was allowed to be structured this way in the first place. At 23:58 p.m., the platform still moves. Posts still appear. Comments still accumulate, but something fundamental has shifted. She is no longer treated as a participant in the narrative. She has become the reference point for how narratives can be reconstructed after control fails. And somewhere inside the noise of reposts, diagrams, and explanations, the public learns a final quiet thing. Systems do not break loudly. They are only recognized loudly after they have already changed shape.